Tracy Martin, father of Trayvon Martin, received that call or knock on the door that no parent ever wants to hear. In the months and year that followed, America paid attention as this tragedy unfolded in the local and international media. For the Martin family, they lost a loved one that was far too young in life. For America, this became a reminder of old wounds caused by racial boundaries, mistrust, and a strong desire for justice for all. As the trial ended and verdict was decided, it became clear that though we have come a long way in embracing diversity, there is much to be learned and much more to be said. This is a Long Beach dialogue with members of our community that care about the future of our city and our nation. My name is Derek Simpson, and I'm Executive Director of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. And as the months have gone by and we've thought about all that's taken place around this nation regarding the Trayvon Martin verdict and the trial for George Zimmerman, we thought we'd take this opportunity to have dialogue in our own community so that you, the viewers, and those of us here on this set can share our views on what took place, can share opinions, maybe even share solutions for the future. And what we think we have here to join us and to join you are a group of people who work in our community and lead in our community and are active in our community that have some interesting perspective on what we want to talk about today. And to begin with, I'd like to introduce them to you. First, on the set with me, we have Amilcar Cabral. Next to Amilcar, we have Ahmed Safir. On my immediate right, Dr. Alex Norman, someone who's been very involved in the community and rethinking Greater Long Beach. A young man that I'm very proud of in our community that is a part of our Men Making a Change program, and he's representing, wearing his sweatshirt, and that's Xavier Henry. Welcome, Xavier. And then we wanted to make sure that we had the perspective of a mom and someone who's also a leader both in our schools and in our community, and that's Ms. Tasha Hunter. Welcome, Tasha.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's stay with you, Tasha, for a moment. I read this quote, and it said that Tracy Martin visited Capitol Hill to urge lawmakers to prevent the untimely death of more black children. And when I heard that, and I think about what happened, because I got such a call, not that my son was killed, but that my son was shot. And I remember very vividly how that felt, you know, someone that you raised as a part of you. But you have two young sons, and when you hear what Trayvon's father talked about, the untimely death, what do you say to your two young sons?
Well, I do remember when I heard one of my older sons, my 8-year-old, walked in when I found out about the Trayvon Martin case, and all he saw was me in tears. And at that point, I had to explain the tears. And my explanation was, well, there's certain things that we as African Americans, young boys, may go through in life. And I actually found an article that helped me explain. It was called the Black Male Code, just different things that young black men have to go through. And I explained to them, we don't want or wish for anything like this to ever happen to anyone, especially our youth. But in certain situations, they may. So my conversation has been ongoing with the boys of how they carry themselves, how they walk, how they approach all people, and how they interact with people, and what they represent with each, you know, calculated movement. And I'm pretty sure it's a little different than what other cultures may have to tell their young children, especially their young boys, and how to walk. And there is that way that we have to maintain ourselves, because we don't want another situation like that.
Now, it's interesting hearing you say this, because here you are a mom,
Right.
and you're telling your sons, you know, basically what you feel that it takes for them to be young men that carry themselves properly and safe. How do they receive that from you as mom?
Well, it's not just by myself. We have a strong network. Their father, my ex-husband, my father is very involved. You know, being a man who is a retired Marine, former police officer in San Diego, just a retired man now, being able to see these boys. He's never had boys in his life.
Right.
These are the first boys. So our village, our community,
Right.
their team coaches, all their activities, they're surrounded by different people that help nurture them and teach them how. But they receive things well from me. Sometimes I have to explain it in creative ways with two different personalities.
Right.
You know, I have to get creative with everything,
Right.
and they want to know why. And I allow that with my children. It's not just because I said so. I explain the why in a respectful way.
Right.
You know, so they're receptive.
Right. And I'd like to switch gears and talk with you, Dr. Norman, because I know that in the city of Long Beach, one of the things that you're most known for is your participation in Rethinking Greater Long Beach, and specifically part of your background being in terms of educating communities about community policing. But help those who are looking at this particular program understand a little bit more about the stand your ground laws, at least from what you know, and then how community policing might be the next element of that particular question as we move forward as an option to something like that.
Sure. Well, stand your ground laws really have their origin in self-defense. And they originally were created to give people some relief if they were threatened in their own home. And so the assumption was that you stood your ground in your own home. And there are many states, there are some, 30 states across the country that have stand your ground laws. Here in California, our stand your ground law states that you have a right to defend yourself while you're in your home. If you're outside of your home, you have a responsibility to retreat. And unlike the Florida law gives you the opportunity to stand your ground outside of your home. Now, ironically, that was not the case of the George Zimmerman case, because the case wasn't based on stand your ground. It was based on self-defense. And so the issue was, did he feel threatened, even though he had initiated the contact that resulted in the act of his feeling threatened? Now, he was a former Neighborhood Watch person, and that is a volunteer unit that is a component of community-oriented policing. And we have in Long Beach a similar program called Community-Oriented Public Safety, of which I was an architect with former Chief Batts. And that assumes that there's a partnership between the community and the police to solve crime problems. That means then that the police are the contact for solving the problem, but that it's the responsibility of the person in the community to notify the police. And in the case of Zimmerman, even though he notified 9/11 and they warned him not to go further, he went further.
Did anyway. Right.
Good policing strategy would have allowed the police to come in and make the confrontation rather than the citizen. And in Long Beach, we are responsible for notifying the police and then allowing the police to then do enforcement.
Now, Ahmed, when we hear this and we hear Dr. Norman talking about community policing and what happened in this particular case, many different leaders were quoted and got involved and all across America, and we'll talk in a moment about marches. But from an African American leadership perspective, when you watched this on TV, what were your feelings about how we as a community reacted to the circumstances?
Well, since America is a living organism, you have to ignite activity to bring about the change that the community needs. Had we not had people that had the tenacity and the will to want to speak up, the rest of us may have not have known about it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we're in a social media atmosphere, things that it takes to make news. Some people make headlines better than others, mm-hmm. but that became the communication. Now, we can't misinterpret what's taking place, who's driving the agenda, just because it makes headlines. Mm-hmm. So once we observed in these so-called leaders that we have that are able to get the cameras to look their way, I give them credit. It created education, and I want to be conservative in terms of saying that they don't have a role or they just want the spotlight. I think we need those kinds of people to make this whole puzzle work.
Right. Now, Mokar, you were involved personally in some of the leadership of sort of forming a response for the community. As Ahmed just said, we're sort of a living organism, and so that organism has to breathe, it has to express itself, and it did that across the nation in various ways, but in Los Angeles, you were a part of one of the ways that it expressed itself. Can you share how that occurred?
Well, yeah, actually, you know, I was fortunate enough to be involved in a number of the rallies that were held throughout the period of time, initially following the verdict. But the one thing that I would say is I think in this particular instance, social media actually did play a very positive role in spreading the message. One of the issues, obviously, is you can't control, you know, all of the aspects of how the message gets spread,
Gotcha.
but it does reach a ton of people, particularly young folks. One of the most encouraging things that I saw in my experiences in these rallies was the overwhelming participation of young people. And when I say young people, I'm talking about from the ages of 5 to 18, that not only were there because they felt passionate about the outcome of the verdict, but because they saw themselves as part of the overall issue, not just as somebody witnessing it, but as this law, this death, unfortunately, affects me directly. And therefore, you know, once we were able to identify that they did have that enthusiasm, that understanding, I think the next phase, you know, going forward for any of the additional things we want to do, whether it be marches, whether it be protests, is figuring out how can we use that energy, you know, that desire, that passion to aggressively advance, not just, you know, our frustration about the issue, but to actually make legislative and actual progress throughout the court system and the criminal justice system, which I'm sure we'll address even further.
Yeah, now, Dr. Norman mentioned the California law versus Florida law. Is there a chance that this will now surface? I know that there's the Congressional Black Caucus has interest in this. I would imagine this would be something that begins at the federal level and trickles down to the states because they individually make those decisions, correct?
No, I think the states are independent of the federal government and the stand your ground laws.
Okay.
I think the issue becomes whether or not there can be a standardized version that allows people who are in threatened situations to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. California's law is adequate. And as the Attorney General said, in California, if you are accosted outside of your home, your responsibility is to retreat. So you're to get yourself out of that situation. Hmm. And rather than force it to a point that you then feel threatened enough that you have to use force, sometimes fatal force.
Gotcha. Now, we have several different guests on the set, but one young man that I haven't spoken to yet, and you're sort of in the spotlight in the sense that you are who we're speaking of. And what were your feelings as a youth in our community when you heard about this? And you were in Atlanta when part of this occurred. Real quickly, and we're going to come back to this later, but what were some of the first thoughts that went through your head?
Well, you know, being even one state above it in Atlanta, it was just hard to believe that it happened. You know, a fellow young black youth, and you only wish things like this happen in the movie.
Right.
You know, you don't want it to become a reality or have it happen to a family that you might be close with, because that can change, that can change everything.
And it will change everything because of people like you, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about that.
The reason I actually wanted to come out today is not to take questions, but to speak to an issue that obviously has gotten a lot of attention over the course of the last week, the issue of the Trayvon Martin ruling. I gave a preliminary statement right after the ruling on Sunday, but watching the debate over the course of the last week, I thought it might be useful for me to expand on my thoughts a little bit. First of all, I want to make sure that, once again, I send my thoughts and prayers, as well as Michelle's, to the family of Trayvon Martin, and to remark on the incredible grace and dignity with which they've dealt with the entire situation. I can only imagine what they're going through, and it's remarkable how they've handled it. The second thing I want to say is to reiterate what I said on Sunday, which is there are going to be a lot of arguments about the legal issues in the case. I'll let all the legal analysts and talking heads address those issues. The judge conducted the trial in a professional manner. The prosecution and the defense made their arguments. The juries were properly instructed that in a case such as this, reasonable doubt was relevant, and they rendered a verdict. And once the jury's spoken, that's how our system works. But I did want to just talk a little bit about context and how people have responded to it, and how people are feeling. You know, when Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
Trayvon Martin could have been me. Xavier, I want to ask you, when you hear the President of the United States saying that it could have been him, could have been you, could have been any one of us gentlemen, or even our lady guest here, but when you hear that, what thoughts go through your head?
I mean, it's true. It could have been anyone. It could have been somebody who was actually trying to cause trouble, somebody who was actually just trying to go home, you know. And it's crazy how media, they twist the story so much. So really only a few people are gonna know the true story about what really happened. Yellow journalism, that happens a lot. And of course, you know, justice will come.
I want to ask you, Ahmed, when you look at this video of the president speaking, what thoughts come to your mind?
Well, I think for a president to stand up and identify with one of the many aspects of the hemorrhaging within our country is nothing but excellent. It brought tears to everyone in the household's eyes. I think the looking at the larger picture is, and he was kind of alluding to it, I think that we have to have the good other folks in America to stand up and admit their fears for any kind of healing to begin to take place, because that were those his peers that were on the jury. See, those were all people who have fears. And with fear, what kind of decision can you render? We won't say that their fear manifested hate, but just fear itself. And that other juror that no one is able to figure out, and they say she's either Hispanic or African American. They don't quite know what she is. I don't know why it's so confusing. But she said she was threatened. She was bullied in the jury room. See, and this is what I talked about when it was going on. I say, if there's a good mind on the jury, they're going to be bullied. And I just been on a jury about a month and a half ago, and we had a bully there that I had to address. So he mentioned the system. This is what our system is. Our system was not revised once the whole nation became free in 1965. Remember, these systems were set up to protect and insulate those who are the rich. It's there to protect them and to preserve them. So now that you had addition to the system, it's a constant fight so the system can change. Maybe we need to have, maybe this is why affirmative action was wiped off the board. So the juries can't have a composition that reflects America.
Tasha, I know that you work in our schools, and aside from being a mom, when you talk about systems, I know that there's also concerns within schools about maybe how young men of color are treated certain ways in schools, not necessarily in Long Beach Unified, but in general in education. But when you talk to other young men, and what do you see, knowing how much you work with them, about the issues that they're facing and how they might address them?
Well, that is one of the things that I speak with students about, being in both Compton and Long Beach Unified School District. I see greater issues in the other districts, and I talk to them. I'm one of those teachers that comes in. I do reading intervention and also do substitute teaching throughout both districts. But especially with intervention, we discuss everything, you know, and that's why I'm one that is requested, and because I'm one that talks to students openly and honestly and let them speak to me in a way they might not be able to speak to others at the school and the parent. And, you know, it's about that code. It's about what they need to do to empower themselves and also to pull back. There's something I notice about this generation, and it's good, but also it has that other side. There's a no fear. And with that no fear, there's also a lack of respect at times. And so with that, I try and inject ways to be respectful, still hold who you are, your personality, you know, but still maintain the respect. Keep that no fear. Let's see how we can challenge that. If you have that one challenging student that likes to challenge, okay, I think you'd be good at law. Let's try that. So I speak to them and try and empower that in such a way.
I know that the schools can only do so much, and families have to be involved as well. And then there are programs such as what we have here at Long Beach Community Action Partnership with our Men Making a Change and our Leadership Academy mentoring program. And we want to talk more about that because we focused a lot on what some of the issues are everywhere from the system to, you know, the educational system. And when we return, we want to focus more on what might be some of the solutions that augment systems such as what we've been discussing.
Number 3, and this is a long-term project. We need to spend some time in thinking about how do we bolster and reinforce our African American boys. And this is something that Michelle and I talk a lot about. There are a lot of kids out there who need help, who are getting a lot of negative reinforcement. And is there more that we can do to give them a sense that their country cares about them and values them and is willing to invest in them. I'm not naive about the prospects of some grand new federal program. I'm not sure that that's what we're talking about here, but I do recognize that as president I've got some convening power, and there are a lot of good programs that are being done across the country on this front. And for us to be able to gather together business leaders and local elected officials and clergy and celebrities and athletes and figure out how are we doing a better job helping young African American men feel that they're a full part of this society, and that they've got pathways and avenues to succeed. I think that would be a pretty good outcome from what was obviously a tragic situation, and we're going to spend some time working on that and thinking about that.
We heard the president talk about programs, and we've heard them talk about it, not necessarily that he had the answers right away, but that there were some answers that needed to be sought. And I think it's a big step for our leader of this nation and of the free world, for that matter, to talk about the fact that there is an issue and that there need to be changes that can address those issues in a creative way. In the beginning, when we introduced ourselves, Amilcar talked about the fact that social media played a big role in a positive way. And when you talk about working with youth in the community and social media and what you've seen in community organizing, because that's one of your strengths, what might be some of the ways that from a grassroots level, from the young people, we heard Tasha talk about they have no fear. How can we possibly, from what you've seen, channel that no fear attitude into a positive energy that can begin to make change?
Well, first of all, just to comment on the clip, I think our president, my president, President Obama, I really believe that's one of his finest moments as president. The fact that he spoke out in such clear a voice about who he is, much to the chagrin of a lot of folks on the other side of the political spectrum who said as a president, he shouldn't be allotted to speak on issues that concern the black people. So just on that, I think that's one of his finest moments, and I'm very proud of him for doing so. But to answer your question, is I think one of the things going forward, very much as he spoke of in that address, is figuring out a way to ensure that this generation that adequately doesn't have that fear understands its true value. I think one of the most saddening things about Trayvon Martin's death was that essentially he was tossed and discarded, and he was considered disposable. That's one of the things that is very troubling going forward in our community, that a lot of the youth don't really see their true value beyond simple things such as sports or entertainment. I think going forward, what we need to do as activists, as organizers, is try to instill in them that very value that they have and how they could actually come together to make social change.
Now, Xavier, talking about value, I mean, here you are entering your senior year in high school. You're an athlete, very articulate. It's easy for adults. I'm always intrigued by the fact that we have youth committees with no youth. and we are, as adults, trying to come up with the best solutions. And clearly there's some wisdom there, but from your perspective, what's missing? What is you, as a young black man in Long Beach, what would you like to see that would help you grow up stronger and wiser in dealing with issues such as what we've been discussing?
Well, pretty much knowing that as a youth, our voice will be heard and that our opinions will matter. There are so many youth out there, like my friends, they have a lot of things to say, but they won't speak up because they think it will be a waste of time. And that fear of saying something, but just being, all right, we're gonna put that on the back of our mind, we're gonna save that for later. They want that change, or they want that to be put in initiative.
Now, how do you, if you hear that and you stepping up as a leader, what do you say to them to say that there can be a change? I mean, here you are a part of something that we hope will stimulate dialogue. That's one of the purposes of this program. What could you go back and say to them to begin making this change happen?
It's possible. I never imagined sitting here, discussing something as important. I thought I would always be the one at home watching it on TV or watching it on the computer. But if you have something to say, just find a way to get it out there and say it. Opportunities will pop up. Just don't give up on your hopes and your dreams, and you'll be able to get it out there, out to the public.
And I would imagine in being a part of the Men Making a Change program that that's been one step, hopefully, that we've contributed to you making such a change. I know one of the things that we want to continue to talk about in this particular show as we come to closer to the conclusion are what are possibilities for solutions, because it's easy to talk about problems. I often tell members of our team, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a problem and a solution. And as a community, as you watch and you hear this dialogue, and Ahmed mentioned earlier, you hear it around the table, when the videos were shown, there was dialogue that was had, and we want to get to that. But before we do, we want to share a few more photos from around the nation of events that have occurred. And when we come back, we'll get more into Malik's perspective, or Almakar, on what transpired in Los Angeles as it relates to the marches up there as well. Very powerful images, and I want to take a moment to thank Bobby, who put these images together for our opening and to tell the story. You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and when you look at some of those photos about what's transpired in the recent year or more, very powerful. So thanks to Bobby. I want to talk with now Dr. Norman, because if I ever had someone that I looked up to as a mentor, and he is actually a member of our board of directors, it's been you, because of the energy that you have to continue to stay involved on so many different levels, not only with this agency, but you're also involved with the Organizing Institute. And can you share because you've been a professor at UCLA, you've seen so much transpire in life, and that's wisdom you can't purchase. It has to be earned day by day. What are you seeing when you work with our youth that you're proud of, and what would you like to see continue to evolve and change?
Well, I'd like to put those comments in the context of what the president said in terms of our needing to really approach it from a systems perspective. That clinically you can't reach in and solve these kind of problems. I was just thinking as he was speaking that policing has a community responsibility as well as a law enforcement responsibility. As a matter of fact, the origin of policing in Western society comes from England, where the community are the police and the police are the community. And so they work hand in hand, and that's the basis of our community-oriented public safety program in Long Beach, where the community develops a relationship with the police so that they see the police as a resource. I often lament that it's too bad that Trayvon didn't call 911 instead of calling his friend, because he didn't see the police as a resource. Now, and the work that I'm doing now, what we're doing is training organizers for change, because I believe that people like Xavier have to become the change that they want to see. And what we're doing essentially is training people in advanced organizing techniques to think strategically about changing systems and policies. But you do that over a long period of time. And in order to do that, you really have to see what the resources are. And police are a resource. Like, I mean, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you hear a siren, you're kind of happy to know that somebody's on the job, whether it's a fire truck or whether it's a police car, you know, but you're happy that somebody's out there. What we're doing basically is saying that young people have to assume personal responsibility themselves to bring about the change that they want to see. And that means acting responsibly. But it also means acting strategically. It means critically analyzing the situations you're in, using your observation and your personal relationship skills to bring about change by including others. So it's designed to really broaden the sense of community. The assumption being that over a long period of time, if you're dissatisfied with people that you see in elected positions, then your responsibility is to seek out and find people to run as candidates yourself, so that the people that you put in office will have an affinity for you and a knowledge of your problems and a commitment to change. So what we're basically doing is training future leaders of Long Beach, people who will be committed to changing Long Beach for the better.
Now, Ahmed, I know you've been involved in community organizing and organizing since college days or maybe even before that. And when you hear about what's happening on an individual basis as a result of programs such as what Dr. Norman just mentioned, what do you think when you get to the organizational level within the community? I know you and I are part of the African American Convening Committee, and then there's NAACP, and there's Urban League, and there's many other historical organizations. But from an organizational structure, as we get these young people to step up and know their responsibility, what can the organizations do, whether they be historical or new, to embrace new thoughts and turn the page in terms of how we address today's issues?
Well, first off, new thoughts and thinking is not easy, and it's causing a difficulty because most folks are trained within the box, and there's a fear, that word again, of going outside the box. The 100 Black Men of Long Beach, our mentoring program, we now have an alumni. And I believe we need all of these programs. There's such a vast need for programs that help young people, excuse me, figure it out, what life is about. With so many fatherless homes and mothers having the full burden, we don't need any more ex-husbands. That's a problem. We got some inert cultural problems that is breeding this misunderstanding of life, along with children having children. So programs need to address these in terms of solutions. Roll our sleeves up and actually get right organically into the soil to help young people at an early age. I remember when I have 7 children, and I used to go to my boys, my daughters and sons' school and sit in their classrooms in elementary school because I knew they could get miseducated real quick. So all the teachers, you the only daddy that comes over here. But one, it made my sons and daughters feel good, and 2, it let the teacher know I'm paying attention.
Right.
When I arrive to open house, don't tell me my son, he has a beautiful smile. And then go to the next parent. Hold it, come back over here. Let's talk about academics. But you have to be aware and not fearful of the people that are in positions so you can stand up. In our organizations many times is that we have people that are afraid of the system and the people that represent the system, so therefore they won't stand up to really identify what some of those problems is within and without.
Yeah, very important. And Tasha, when you hear, you have organizations, you have individuals that are being trained, such as what Dr. Norman talked about, and all of this takes time, as change requires time, and yet we know our youth are more like the microwave generation. You know, everything is immediate. Even texts are short to get the message across so you can move on to the next thing. How do we bridge that gap between, you know, I call it lessons of the farm. You can't plant a seed and go out the next day and harvest. It takes natural time. How do we approach that when you're working with young people such as you do?
Well, one of the ways is that I incorporate popular culture. I know what they like. I listen to the same songs on the radio, different radio stations, and so I bring it in with one of the poetry programs that I do, except I have the instrumentals. Why don't you put your words on there? If you don't like what it is that you're hearing, I know I don't like all the lyrics that I'm hearing on the radio, so I have that same beat that drives them to dance. Put your own words on top of it, which is how they're writing and they're creating, and they're, you know, and that right there is the only thing, or one of the main things that keeps them coming back, you know, and me not judging. I think that's very important, that there's a two-way dialogue.
So that adage of meeting them where they are to get them where you want them to be is very important. Would you agree with that, Xavier, as you're listening?
Definitely. It's the youth, we think it's a generation clash.
Right.
You know, we want our things to happen our way, but then we know that the elders, they have more wisdom than us. So we have to be able to come and meet in the middle.
And I think it's important as you meet in the middle, it's important to listen, I would imagine, because sometimes we hear but we don't listen. And there's a lot to be said both ways. But that understanding, as we have, I talk about there's monologue and there's dialogue. And sometimes as parents or sometimes as leaders, we get so caught up in the monologue that we forget the relevance of the dialogue. And this show has been about dialogue as we talk about real issues that have impacted our community, but it impacted our community on the other side of this nation, on another coast, and yet it resonates right here on this panel of guests that have joined us and in the streets that we walk every day and among the young people that are on this set and some even behind the camera that are learning skills to take them to the next level. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to begin to wind down this particular conversation and talk about solutions that might be real. And we encourage you to reach out to us on padnet.tv to share your ideas and your solutions as you watch this program in the future. So when we come right back, we'll get into the solution mode of this particular conversation.
I always say that Trayvon was my hero. He saved my life, and not to be there in his time of need, it's real troublesome not to be able to save my son's life. And to have his name slandered and demonized, I think as a father, I think it's real important that my message to the world is that we won't let this verdict sum up who Trayvon was. I vowed to do everything in my power not to give up the fight for him. Not only the fight for Trayvon, but the fight for so many other young black and brown boys of this country. We've taken the negative energy that has been throughout this whole process. We've taken that negative energy and we're trying to turn it into a positive. A lot of people will tell you that nothing positive can come out of death, but I disagree, and I disagree wholeheartedly, because it is what we can do tomorrow as a nation, as a people, to stop someone else's child from being killed is certainly a positive. I'm sorry. But if there's something that we can do as a foundation to help other families from going through this, then we're here.
To help other families from going through this, I cannot imagine, as the father of a son and daughter and the grandfather of 3 granddaughters, to ever have to sit there as poised, as Mr. Martin was just then, and talk about his son, but talk about his son, as he said, taking a negative and turning it into a positive. How can their loss be our gain as a community and we all grow from it and be stronger? As I looked at that particular video, those were some of the thoughts that came to my mind, but I want to share maybe some of the thoughts of our guests. And let's start on the end and sort of work around. When you heard that, Amilcar, what were the thoughts that went through your mind?
Well, I mean, I think he hit the nail on the head as far as taking something that was a negative and utilizing that energy to turn it into something as a positive. I think one of the things that we spoke about earlier in one of the earlier segments is you have a lot of various organizations, but unless there's a sort of consolidated push, unless some of these organizations like the Urban League and the NAACP communicate with each other, it's up to us as the leaders to give the young people a mission as to a plan of action, what we want you to do. I think it's one thing for us to say we want the young people to get involved or we want to meet them where they are. But once we get their attention, what are we going to instill in them as far as a plan of action? What is it that we want them to do? Otherwise, we end up just holding up traffic. I mean, I know there was some situations like that here in Los Angeles, and as much as those that energy was positive in the fact that it got people's attention, what are we prepared to do as the leaders, as the organizers, as the organizations to sort of consolidate that energy and push it forward? Now, I know next week is the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. And a lot of various organizations and community leaders are going to be convening to discuss these very types of strategies. What can we do going forward to try to advance not just a blanket sort of expression of this frustration, but what can we do collectively? And I'd love to hear, because I know with the various STEAM panel that we have here, many folks have been in the struggle a lot longer than I have, but according to what I've seen in history, social change, at least the kind that we need, didn't usually occur until we managed to find out a financial way to put our economic dollars to work, whether it was boycotting, whether it was petitioning, figuring out some sort of way to make our impact as a community felt, to make that next level of change, from it, whether it be political or whether it be from the leaders.
Ahmed, your impressions when you heard Mr. Martin speak?
Well, I think he's approaching it correctly. He's trying to let cool heads prevail, so there wouldn't be a negative reaction. But everybody's ready for the party. But it's the third meeting that tells the story. Is everybody there when it's time to again think outside the box? Because this is, this attitude is almost fermenting. We've almost mutated ourselves into a position where nothing gets done. And then when you have, all of us need to be paying close attention to this advocacy development that Alex and his company have put together. I think that helps on the system side. And then as he's speaking about we've got to address the family. We've got to get each individual where your insides are correct. Now, where do we do that? What institutions we have for doing that? Well, the church is the biggest one we have. But I don't think many of them go really inside in our community. And we've really got to develop that where if and I always use this example, if there was drugs lying the street, people would walk through it like it's snow, and there would be no need or want. So it's the same with the young people who want to aspire to other heights. We have to share what possibilities are out there. If you don't know what I always used to tell my children, nothing in, nothing out. So if you don't give them something, then they don't have anything to sort through when they come to those moments where they're confronted with a George Zimmerman. So we have to, even if we have a program that brings people through so young people can be exposed to what's available, that helps the thinking. And we don't have enough of them. We need more. We need more.
On that note, Dr. Norman, you heard what the father had to say, and he spoke to Congress, and you know what you're hearing and the minds of the youth that you work with. What were your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, when he spoke, I immediately thought of context. And I thought of Long Beach. You know, what can we do? Because he's asking, let's do something so that no other parent has to go through what
Right.
my wife and I have gone through.
Right.
And it seems to me that Ahmed mentioned the role of leadership. Now, recently, the African American Convening Committee published a State of Black Long Beach report, in which it chronicled the historical development of Long Beach and the role that black people have and have not played in its development. That report outlined a variety of issues. Those issues were a call to action. And so the question that report ended with was whether or not black leadership can come together and in discussion and debate develop an agenda for black Long Beach to improve the quality of life. And in 2 years, I would love to report that there were small community meetings, that there were home meetings, that people were discussing it in church, that they stopped talking about the hereafter and started talking about the here now, you know?
Yeah.
That leadership in the black community in terms of organizations began to focus on what we can do together, and that means together with the young people.
Speaking of young people, Xavier, not so much what the father had to say, but the fact that you are one of those young people, and you know what the issues are because you're walking the streets. What are your thoughts in terms of solutions that this community might listen to, those who are watching and those who are sitting here with you?
Well, we have to pretty much get out of the well that we've been placed in. As history and statistics have shown, we've been pushed to the edge. And we have to want that change. We want to take the time. We need to take the time to say, all right, we have a voice. Here are the things that we want done, the things we need to be done. And we want to be able to express ourselves. I used to be one of the quiet youth. And after a while, I got into public speaking. And it shows that after a while, once you are able to express yourself, and once you're strong about it, you can change the opinion of others.
That's where the time comes in.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier, can't expect to plant a seed and reap benefits right away, but I hear you saying, you want to change and it takes a little time. Tasha, we have just a few minutes left here. What are your thoughts in conclusion based on the videos that you've seen and the dialogue that we've had? What are some of the things you think we need to do moving forward?
I think it's very important, us as a community, to talk, like you said, talk to the youth. Realize that they are approachable. I mean, I'm one of those, my children call me nosy, because if I see somebody on the corner, upset, angry, crying, I pull over, talk. You need to talk about something, I use that, I'm a teacher, I can talk to you, anything going on. I am that one. I correct when it's appropriate, and I just feel like we have to let them know that they're valuable. We have to know that their lives matter and they truly do have meaning. That empowerment, affirmations, and that's the foundation of it from there. Once they realize how important they are, they'll value themselves even more.
Are you amazed at how many don't feel that value, that
Right.
don't feel special when you meet them out there?
I do, and I do little things like with my children, they have to look in the mirror and say, I'm beautiful, I'm the best me in the whole wide world. And I did it with my daughter who's 21 years old. And to this day, you cannot tell her anything about who she is. She's so confident in that. And it's a matter of showing that worked.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that confidence that Tasha just spoke of and the energy and the intelligence that these guests have shared are important. And I think that that's part of the solution for all of us to consider, whether you be black Long Beach or purple Long Beach or green Long Beach. We are Long Beach and we are a community. And when we unite, we can think about what the solutions are and we can work towards those solutions. But we have to start with ourselves. And I think that that's part of what we've heard some of our guests speak of. Tracy Martin said that I think 50 years from now, when I'm dead and gone, I would like to see that Trayvon Martin's name is attached to some type of statute or amendment that says you can't simply profile our children, shoot them in the heart, kill them, and say that you were defending yourself. For a moment, think about 50 years past and all the changes that have occurred in our world, and yet so many things remain the same as human beings. Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of The Four Agreements, said that when we make assumptions, it is because we believe we know what others are thinking and feeling. We believe we know their point of view, their dream. We forget that our beliefs are just our point of view, based on our belief system and personal experiences, and have nothing to do with what others think and feel. As we close, I want to suggest that we take the time to listen, to engage, and seek first to understand before we assume the thoughts and intentions of others that don't look like us or dress like us. The world that we have and the world that will be is what we make it. Let's all strive every day to be our best and make the next 50 years the best of any of us could ever hope for. Thanks to our guests here on the set, thanks to our great PadNet crew, and most of all, thanks to you who are watching as you help us make a change for the better in our Long Beach community. Peace to you and yours. Thank you.